space to heal and expand self-love's light within us. And I've had the pleasure to interview Elizabeth, and she's in the middle of a book launch. It's a very exciting time for her. So super excited for you to all hear from Elizabeth's presentation. We do have handout notes in that download guide. So if you had a chance to download that, you can follow along with her presentation and fill in the blanks and stay engaged. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining our Sing Your Heart Song Summit.
Thanks, Olivia. Sure appreciate that introduction. Are you ready for me to start, or do we give people a bio break for a few minutes?
Yes, let's make you co-host because I know you have a PowerPoint. Let me do that. And then, let's see, find where you are. Steve, do you have to make her co-host or do we have to remove? Okay.
You should actually be able to share her screen without me making her co-host, but I can still make that happen. Once I find her name in here. There we go.
So here's the irony, okay? I come to the US, I think I'm gonna have this great connection because I'm not in Nigeria. And then I end up getting roped into a family thing. So I'm not on a really great connection now. So I don't know if you can hear me very well.
No, we cannot hear you very well. Do you know how to change the volume on Zoom?
And I've got your presentation. If you want me to share my screen and pull up the slides, I'll click through for you.
Well, that might be better because then it won't chew us up as much bandwidth, maybe. This is oh well.
All right, let me do that. Let me get the slideshow ready here.
But can you hear me? Is the volume better?
No. So if you go to beside where it says mute and click on the caret next to that, that'll bring up the audio.
The test mic is, I mean, it's on maximum.
Whatever you just did made you sound your volume a lot better.
Okay, all right, good. I'm glad.
We can't understand you.
It does have a little bit of an echo to it, though.
That's funny. I think I had a better connection in Nigeria. I'm hotspotting with my phone. Just call in on my phone instead if Olivia is going to put the presentation up.
Your volume sounds really good right now, Elizabeth.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm coming in and out, so oh well. Okay. So let's get started then with Shift Your Story, 3 simple practices to get unstuck and make powerful progress. And I'm going to share the number 1 reason why we procrastinate and what to do about it. And also my secret to a lasting sense of accomplishment and how to easily stay on track to get things done. So let's just go to the agenda. You can see that. That's the next slide, Olivia.
Oh.
Can you just scroll down?
I'm seeing the agenda if that's what you're intending to be seen.
Yeah, the agenda page is up.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide then. The me on the left is in 2012. The me on the right is 2017. And I might look happy in that 2012 picture on the left, but I was just a couple of days from deciding that I didn't want to live anymore. And this is the thing, you can't really tell by looking at people how happy they are inside. And what shifted for me is, you see, the story that I was telling myself in 2012 that I was covering up, and I mean, I looked on the outside happy, but inside, I thought I was a failure. I thought I had failed as a mom. I thought I was a bad mom. I thought I wasn't creative. Olivia, I think we're also seeing, I'm also seeing your other screen, the other stuff you're doing right now. And I thought I wasn't creative at all. I thought, because I'm the sixth child, I thought that everybody else in the family had inherited creativity and there was nothing left over for me. These were the stories that I was telling myself. And thing is, I was wrong because there were heart songs that wanted to be sung. And I wasn't allowing them to come through because I didn't believe them. I didn't believe that there was anything for me. And so it took me a while to go beyond these fears. And now I coach entrepreneurs, business owners, and business leaders, and I specialize in perfectionists. So let's start with the first step. So if you want to go to the next slide, and then the next slide, we're just going to show very briefly. So I'm going to start with procrastination, okay? Because there's a 10-year study that was done at the University of Calgary, and they came up with 4 reasons for why everybody procrastinates. What I'm seeing on my screen, maybe, oh, there we go. That the definition is an intended course of action that we delay despite consequences. So it's not just something like, oh, maybe someday. It's really something that we intend to do. There's consequences for us not doing it, but we still don't do it. And so they categorize these things into 4 buckets, but I'm really going to focus on one because that's the number one reason why we put off doing things. And just a side note about this, this study that the University of Calgary did, they thought it was going to take 5 years and it ended up taking 10 years. And so they laugh and joke that they were late on their procrastination study. So I hear things from my clients all the time, like, I just want to get everything right. I wait to the last minute so that I don't overthink it all, things like this. And what happens is there are 1 in 5 of us who are chronic procrastinators, and this is what they found. And I hear time and time again from perfectionists that, you know, procrastination is a big issue. But the thing is, we just worry about it more because we're so achievement oriented. Now, the thing is that everybody, almost everybody, 95% of the population procrastinates. And 20% are chronic. And when we mean chronic, we mean like the consequences are significant. They affect relationships. They, you know, there may be a financial thing associated with it. Like, I mean, I would pay my taxes late. I would pay penalties, fees, interest. I was a master procrastinator. So it wasn't only my perfectionism getting in, it was just so how many of you can relate to doing things at the last minute just so you won't try to get it perfect, or this chronic procrastination, or putting a lot of pressure on yourself to get things done? You can just put a yes in the chat. So I hear a lot of times like, I just want to get things right. And they'll wait until the last minute for the deadline and put a lot of pressure on themselves. And then the problem is when things don't get done, then we beat ourselves up too, you know, and then feel like a failure because we didn't do it, or we didn't do it in time, or we didn't do it right, or it's not perfect. So as I said, there's 4 main reasons, and we can go to the next slide, Olivia. But the number 1 reason is belief, okay? The number 1 reason why we procrastinate is that we're afraid we're going to fail, or we lack the confidence, or that it's not going to be good enough or perfect for those of us who are perfectionists. And the thing is that we can have all sorts of fabulous tools and techniques. But the bottom line is, if we don't believe that it's within our grasp, that it's achievable, then we're going to put it off. And that's why I'm sharing with you today about, you know, when it's really mindset, because when I help my clients, then this belief is foundational to everything else they achieve. And when we shift our mindset, there is a component of the emotions that go along with it. It's not enough just to say, okay, I'm going to have this mantra, and I'm going to write this mantra down, because if we don't really align ourselves with it and believe it, it's going to be much more difficult. And so we train our brain to look for the possibilities. And there is this perfectionist mindset that's unique to us. And if you go to the next slide. So 1 out of 3 people are perfectionists. And there's different kinds of perfectionists. There's, but I really, and they're not mutually exclusive, okay? There's other oriented, which is what we expect other people to be perfect. There's self-oriented perfectionism. We expect ourselves to be perfect. And then there's socially oriented perfectionism, which is what we believe other people expect of us. Now, whatever perfect is that ideal, okay? Perfect can mean different things to different people, I mean, for what that standard is. But it's even higher with leaders like business owners and business leaders and entrepreneurs. Perfectionism perfectionism is even higher in leaders because I'm not quite sure, but this is what the studies show, and it's been also my experience in coaching leaders that like I just finished up a round of like 10 business leaders in a bank, and at least 4 of my coachees were perfectionists. So let me give you an example. Like, people will strive. We might call ourselves high achievers, okay, or achievement oriented. Like, I met a business owner the other day, and she said, well, I don't like really resonate with perfectionist. I resonate with, I'm achievement oriented. And I'm like, okay. And so then I said, now, does this show up for you? Like, do you try to meet this like really high standard, like perfect, but then you feel like you're coming in here, and then the gap is the gap of not good enough? And she was like, yeah. I said, so what happens when you set a really high standard, and then you actually meet that standard? And I said, do you sometimes, do you kind of think, well, that was so easy, like I should have tried harder, I should have set a higher bar? She's like, oh my goodness, yes. And I said, yeah, because what happens is we unconsciously, we put ourselves into not good enough, because even when we meet it, even when we meet that high standard, we unconsciously shift and say, no, we should have done more. We should have tried harder. We should have set a higher standard, as if everything has to be hard. And so that is the not good enough gap. And that sets up this no-win situation for us as perfectionists or achievement-oriented, whatever you want to call it. This is the no-win situation that all of us self-oriented perfectionists are dealing with. And this is why I offered the gift of, feeling good enough as my ebook, because it's not just you, it's not just me, it's every single self-oriented perfectionist. This is the root of these things. And I mean, it's like we don't give ourselves credit. I was talking to an executive who's like, oh, I need to be more strategic. And I said, okay, what does strategic look like for you? Where do you think that you're lacking? And so he described these things, and then I asked him questions, and then he had the insight that he actually was strategic, but he wasn't giving himself credit for it. Okay? Because he was unconsciously creating that gap. Like, he was meeting it, but he kept thinking, oh, like it should be harder, I should be doing more, like he kept ratcheting it up so that he would be lagging, when in fact he was actually meeting what he needed to meet. And he was one of the top performers in his function. But he did not give himself credit for it. So this is the no-win situation. And does that resonate with anybody on this call? You can just put a yes in the chat box. So you can go to the next slide. I just want to tell you there's hope, because we can shift this, all right? So, does this person look familiar? This is Steve. And when I met Steve, he said, well, I want to get this Toastmasters Club going. But as we talked, he's like, oh, I'm trying to make it perfect before I launch it. And so, Steve, do you have any comment on this?
I do have some comments on this. So I I've been a member of Toastmasters for 6 years. When I moved from Washington State to North Carolina in the United States back in June of last year, I was looking for a club around where I was that would provide what I was looking for, a home for my speaking opportunities and speaking development. And what I was finding was not fitting what I wanted. I would often tell people that I felt flogged after the meeting was over just because it was such a harsh environment for me. And I will admittedly totally confess that I am really super sensitive to evaluations and feedback and that kind of thing. My relationship has changed dramatically and improved dramatically, but it was challenging. All this to say that I finally had it up to here and was like, okay, I want to create something. And so I had actually been thinking for a number of years that I wanted to have a Toastmasters club that was oriented more around the individual and what their interests were, and coaches, authors, speakers, that kind of thing. And because I was so frustrated with my experience, I started to reach out and entertain the idea of creating a Toastmasters club. But as is often my case, I wanted things to be perfect. And I was fortunate to work with Elizabeth and began to look at my perfectionistic tendencies and began to release them more fully. We had our first official meeting of the World of Difference Toastmasters Club on January 13th of this year. We were chartered as a club with 21, maybe 22 members by the 1st of April. And we are now up to about 28 or 29 members, all coaches, authors, speakers, people making world of difference through their words and language. So thank you, Liz, for helping contribute to making that possible.
Yeah, and so, it was this belief that you needed to get it perfect before you could even launch it, right? I mean, that's what I remember. And that was like in November we talked about it. And then as soon as you kind of realized your belief, then you're able to let that go and things went pretty quickly. Is that right?
It is. And I think you were actually instrumental in one of the tools that I've since developed, where I look at basically your story wheel. If you look out in nature and you look at, an acorn is not an oak tree, and an oak tree is not an acorn. To expect the acorn from day one to become an oak tree is ridiculous. But yet, how often do we do that to ourselves, where we're like, when I go out and do this needs to be the most amazing thing since, I don't know, whatever the better analogy of sliced bread is, but it doesn't. What really matters, I've since determined, is just starting. Just getting something out there. Make your first marks, because you can always improve what you've started. You can't improve what you've not started.
That's a really great point, and I'm going to follow up with that in a few minutes. Yeah. So thank you so much for your comments, Steve, because I really want to hammer on the belief part, because a lot of times we say to ourselves, well, I don't know why I can't do this. Well, actually not having clarity, I found, is kind of a reason we tell ourselves, like, oh, I need to know why. But it usually is linked to some sort of belief. And it can be beliefs that we wouldn't normally connect. If you can go to the next slide, I'm going to just tell you quickly about another client of mine. And this is Gina, and she's a coach, and she was transitioning from consulting into coaching. And she was really feeling a little bit guilty about building a business and trying to balance with her with her family. She had a teenager and a younger child, and you know, like putting herself first and her business, and balancing that between her family and her. And so the interesting thing is we had a discussion, and one of the things was just that belief, okay, about that she actually could do some balancing, and that she had done balancing, okay? And so she was able to really move forward as she was shifting this belief. So, you know, that's a little bit of shifting that story in your head, is that belief that we all have about different things. So I would invite you, and let's take the next slide, to just think about something important that you've been procrastinating, that you've been putting it off, and just write it down, or if you feel comfortable, you can put it in the chat box. And I'll just give you a few seconds to think about that, and then we'll talk about what to do about it. All right. All right, so does everybody have something they thought of? Just put a yes in the chat box. Okay, all right. So let's go to the next slide. So this is about alignment. Okay, practice number 1, and you can go to the next slide also, Olivia. So this is about alignment, okay? So you frame what you actually want, not what you don't want, because we tend to worry that something is going to happen that we don't want, and we focus on the negative thing. But if we focus on what it is we actually do want, you know, and there was a period in my life when I was so depressed, and I told you about in 2012, I didn't really know what I wanted. And I wanted clarity. I kept asking for clarity. Like, oh, I really wish I had some clarity. And one of the things I realized is that it's easy to put what you don't want, and then you flip it around to what you actually want. So it was easy for me to identify what I didn't want and then say, oh, okay, I actually want pretty much the opposite of what I don't want. But it just seemed so far out of reach for me for some of these things. Like I remember one of the questions in one of the exercises that I did was, you know, if it didn't sound crazy, I would, and then you fill in the break and in the blank, and I wrote right, you know, WRITE. I just thought that was like the craziest thing ever, because I wasn't a writer. Okay, never studied it. So, okay, I just put it out there. But this alignment with the belief, and we can start with smaller steps. But the thing is, like if I say to you, now don't think of camel, what are you going to do? Think of camel, right? Think of a camel. Oh, there's a camel in this room, or don't imagine that there's a camel in this room. Don't do that. And then like, wait, I can't get this camel out of my head. So we want to bridge the belief, because it may seem so far, and we keep worrying about the negative thing or the thing we don't want to think about. We want to focus on what it is. So this is about alignment and bridging that belief, okay? And to create a more empowering belief. And you know, I'll give you an example. So I was talking with a chief executive officer in an organization, and she said, I'm so incredibly nervous when I go in front of employees to talk. And she told me why, and so we talked through it. And I thought, well, what are some roots to this? What is a more empowering belief, or like what might have been a catalyst that made her nervous? So I said, can you think back to a time, like your earliest memory related to speaking in front of a group? And she said, okay, I've got one. And I said, okay, what happened? And she said, oh, I was really successful. Like it went really well. And then she said, well, that's weird. How come I think that I can't do it? Because I already have some data from, childhood that I did it well. And so she was able to bridge her belief, right? So that the next time she went in front of the group, she felt more confident because she bridged with that memory how she was more successful in the past. And then, okay, here's another example. There's a yoga studio owner that I worked with, and she wanted to run, I think, a half marathon, but she couldn't get up to do it. And she said, what is wrong with me? Like, I can get up and I can take the train or, a flight if I need to, but I just can't get up and exercise. And she kept putting it off and putting it off. And she was beating herself up about not doing it. She really wanted to do this, this marathon. But as we were talking, she said, oh my goodness, I'm forcing myself to get up in the morning, but I'm not a morning person. Why do I think that I need to exercise then? And the irony is that she's a yoga teacher that emphasizes with women how to honor their cycles, their power cycles, aligned with their menstrual cycles. And she's like, this is about honoring my own power cycle throughout the day. I am not a morning person. So she shifted that belief that she didn't need to exercise in the morning. She could exercise at noon, or she could exercise at night. And that was totally fine. And so she began, practicing her running during the day, like at lunchtime or in the evening, and it was totally fine. So that's an example of bridging. So you can go to the next slide. So take that thing that you would like to have happen and just think about what would be a more empowering belief. What would be the opposite of what you don't want? What do you actually want? And you put it in the present, or as if it's already happened. Like, I'll give you an empowering belief that I wrote, which was doing my taxes was easy, fast, and fun. And that was the opposite of the belief I had, was that taxes take forever and they're boring and slow. And then I thought, well, how can I break this up? And then I did some other things. So just take a moment to write down, what do you actually want? What would be a more empowering belief that may help you with that procrastination? And I just want you to notice, when you're writing this down, any resistance or pressure that you feel in your body that says, that's not true, that's not going to happen, you can't do that. Just notice it. Just allow yourself to notice that. And I'm just going to hold space for you. Sometimes when I do this, I yawn a little bit. It's just part of the process. But I'm telling you to just notice that awareness in your body and allow the emotion, and it's part of the alignment. And if it connects to a thought, just allow yourself to explore that thought. Kind of like what I told you with the chief executive officer who connected back to childhood and realized, oh, I actually did a presentation. So we'll just take about 30 seconds and just notice in the body, because the somatic, we store things, we store emotions in our bodies, and we just allow them to come up related to that belief. Do you notice any kind of shift now that you have allowed that sensation related to that belief? You can just put a yes or no in the chat box. It's simply a taste of what I normally do with my clients. But this is part of the alignment and the belief and bridging them. And sometimes it takes a really deep dive. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. Sense of accomplishment. So you can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about this. I like to think of excellence. Oh. Excuse me. I like to think of excellence as the best we can do at any given time with the knowledge we have, the tools and resources that we have, doing our best. Our best is good enough, because when we look in retrospect, we have additional information that we didn't have at the time. So it's about doing our best in that moment. And there's an agility to it because it involves a learning mindset, that we can learn things as we go along. And really, how achievable is perfect? I like to think of perfect as in improve rather than perfect. So as a verb and not a noun, not an outcome, but an action. So let's go to the next slide. The thing is, there's a mindset myth, and that is that accomplishments bring a lasting sense of accomplishment. The issue is that it doesn't actually, because here's what happens, okay? As perfectionists, we have this standard, perfect, and then we don't think we meet it. And then we do it all again, and we do it all again, and we do it all again, or we meet it. And then we unconsciously say, no, we should have tried harder. We should have done more. So there's always this shoulda, coulda, woulda, if only going on in our mind, our story, right? Story that's going on in our head. And the thing is, that's not, achievements do not bring a lasting sense of accomplishment, because the hole that we're trying to fill is about something that really, it's about self-acceptance. It's about accepting our whole self and expanding our self-love so that we even love the imperfect parts of ourselves. I was just talking to someone today, and she said, yeah, there's a lot of regret she has, and she doesn't understand people who say, oh, I wouldn't change a thing about my life. She's like, I change a lot of things. And so I said, I can understand where you're coming from, totally. And I said, the thing is that when I stopped so much of the coulda, shoulda, woulda, and really got in touch with accepting my whole self, my whole imperfect self, because I can't go back and change it. I can only change how I feel about it. And everything that, has happened to me so far has made me who I am. So that's why I wouldn't change it, because I only change how I feel about it, not what actually happened. So this hamster wheel, we can step out of it. We can step out of it. Let me just ask you, if this hamster wheel resonates with any of you, just put a yes in the chat box. I was totally on this hamster wheel. But the thing is, I would get these accomplishments and it would feel like it would go into a void, a black hole, and it would just get sucked in and it wouldn't last. And so I kept going and kept going and kept going, but never feeling good enough. So let's go to the next slide. So how do we close that sense of accomplishment? Well, as I said, it's through accepting our whole self. But think of something that you haven't quite made progress on. I'm sorry, that you have made progress on, but you haven't given yourself credit for it, because maybe you're waiting for it to be perfect. I'll give you an example. I was working with a leader who said, yeah, we have about one more quarter to go and we're 90% of our goal. And I said, that's terrific. How have you celebrated? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, you're at 90% of your goal and you have more than, you don't have very much time left. I mean, you have a whole quarter. You're 90% when really you only needed to be 75%, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we're doing really good. It just occurred to him in that moment. So what is something that you haven't given yourself credit for, but you have made progress? Just think about that for a moment. But it's not perfect, but you're making progress. You're taking steps, you're taking action. What is something? Go to the next slide. So this is the key. You celebrate those steps, that progress, okay? As well as the actual achievement. Because here's what's happened, and this is especially true with perfectionists, okay? But I don't think we have the exclusive on this. We wait and we say, we're going to celebrate when we get it done. And then we get it done, and then what happens? That no-win situation of, this was my expectation, this is where I think I was. And so we still don't celebrate it because there's that not good enough gap. But when we celebrate, okay, we get a dopamine hit in our brain, okay? Oh, that feels really good. Oh, I like that. We celebrate the small steps as well as what we actually achieve. And it doesn't have to be perfect in order to celebrate it. It's just progress. So I had another business owner, and she came one day and she's like, I'm going to celebrate some progress today. And I said, great, what's that? And she said, well, I put on my exercise outfit today. I didn't actually exercise, but this is more progress than I made in the past 2 weeks. So we were like, woohoo. So let's celebrate that. And it's almost like, a Google search engine where your brain, as you begin to celebrate, and this is one of the things I do with in my group coaching, what we do is every week we bring something to celebrate, just anything for that week. And then And then a couple of my students said, oh, you know, I know that I'm going to be reporting back this week about something I should celebrate. So I've been looking, like I'm automatically looking, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like a Google search engine. It starts filtering in your brain like, oh yeah, and I did that, and I did that. Oh yeah, which one of these things I made progress on am I going to report? So this helps with sense of accomplishment because we're celebrating ourselves. All right, so next slide. So how will you celebrate your progress, right? When will you celebrate your progress about what you just did? What are you going to do for yourself about this progress? Just take a little commitment to yourself and write it down. I'm just going to pause for a moment to allow you to do that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, how do you stay on track? We can go to the next slide. I got to tell you that I was, oh, go back up. One more. Yeah, there we go. All right. So I would tell myself a story that I wasn't consistent, and I really couldn't stay on track with stuff if they required like to do it on a regular basis. And see, this idea that Lao Tzu has, which is a journey of 1,000 steps, starts with the first one, is essentially what Steve was just talking about a few minutes ago, right? So when we start, we tend to see things that we wouldn't have seen if we were at the same point. And a friend of mine who works with decision-making skills, she talks about, you know, it's kind of like you take a machete in the jungle and you start to see things as you walk into this jungle, and you can make any decision at any point about which direction you want to go. And maybe sometimes you decide to climb up a little hill to get a different viewpoint. But essentially, if we don't start something, we don't see all of these things at that starting point. We start seeing them as we enter. So I used to just give up too easily. I'd lose momentum, and I told myself I wasn't good at them. And but now I have different data. Okay, like for a whole year, I've made my bed every single day, and it's such a simple thing. But every day, I had made my bed for a whole year, and it's like, wow. So to tell myself that I'm not consistent, I wasn't even consistent with brushing my teeth. Okay, brushing my teeth, making my bed, little simple things. And so I've created consistency, and I have shifted that story in my head. And there was a time when I was really terrified of giving presentations, but I started small. I used to delegate all of the facilitation to my staff because if it required facilitation, not where I was just presenting, but where I was answering questions, what if I didn't know the answer? I was terrified of looking stupid. So does any of this resonate with you at all? Put a yes in the chat box. So let's go to the next slide. So what is something that you think you would like, you know, that you are not as consistent as you would like to be, or maybe it just seems overwhelming? Can you think of something? I'm just going to give you a moment. It might be like making your bed. It might be writing. Just could be anything. So just take a moment for that and jot it down. And let's go to the next slide. So how do we approach this? This is day by day, okay? I don't call it daily. I call it day by day. And the reason I do that is because I give myself space for grace as a perfectionist. Because I used to think, oh, I have to do something every single day, or I've failed. And so I had a writing practice, 15 minutes a day. And I'd skip days. And so I was like, oh no, I skipped, like this is terrible, da, da, da. But then I was like, oh, I'm telling a story in my head. Like, as long as I have enough momentum, I have a day by day practice. And then I don't feel like I am starting over at 0 every time. Because as long as I'm doing it, like, you know, and I don't have more than 2-3 days in between, yeah, it's great. But it's about momentum. And so I give myself that space for the grace. So build momentum through regular practice, day by day practice. You know, sometimes things will come up and it's okay. Don't feel like you have to start at 0 again or stop doing it because, oh, you failed, okay? So you take simple, immediate next steps and you move for further and further and further. Honestly, writing 15 minutes a day, I wrote so much I can write like 800 words in 15 minutes. And I've written so much that goes into the books and my upcoming book next week. So you can really do a lot in 15 minutes. And sometimes there are things that we don't really enjoy doing and we do need to do momentum. I have some things like that. And I just set 15 minutes to do them. Or like seeing when I do them and things like that. So we'll go to the next slide. So what would be an immediate day by day next step for you? Something you could practice to build momentum. Just think about that for a moment. And just jot it down. Olivia, we can go to the next slide. So these are the 3 steps to shift your story and get unstuck. The secret to powerful progress is celebrating the progress and to actually take simple steps toward it. So the power is in the progress, okay? And shift that belief and bridge it. Build enough momentum through regular practice. And this idea is encapsulated in a poem that became a song. So I told you I didn't think I was creative, but in a period of some years, then all of a sudden I wrote a book, I wrote poems, and songs started coming. So the stories that wanted to be released, as I practiced more and I started listening more, I heard more and more. And so I'm just going to leave you with this last thought. Do what you want to do. Dreams really do come true. Heart's desire. Work on them day by day till they become your play. Light your fire. Thank you so much. I'll take any questions you have.
That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing your song, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. My pleasure. It's one of the poems. That song is one of the poems in the books in the Escaping the Shadows poetry book that I'm launching next week on Thursday.
Liz, thank you so much. I'm always just so grateful to hear you share your story and help those of us who are perfectionists to see that there is a more empowering way to move forward rather than be stuck by seeing the gap between where we are and where we want to be rather than where we are and where we used to be. That we are making progress, and every step forward helps us to move in the right direction.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
There is an interesting question in the chat, Liz.
Yeah, I can't really see it, so just tell me what it is.
Okay, so it says, Jewel asks, what if procrastination triggers the adrenaline and you become addicted to the adrenaline buzz you get from that pressure? How do you alter the behavior pattern when it is brain chemistry driven?
Yeah, so I hear this a lot from the perfectionists that I work with, that it's like, yeah, I put it off to the last minute. It's like that. But so there is this thing, but you can shift that because that's adrenaline rush, right? And if we can replace that with dopamine, and that would be chunking it out into smaller steps, giving ourselves a little more leeway, understanding it doesn't need to be perfect, like giving us some time deadlines so that it's smaller pieces, so that it's more of a dopamine than an adrenaline, right? Because there's a difference between the cortisone or cortisol, I might not get it right here, but the healthy dopamine that happens when we're like, oh, I checked that off my list. Oh, I did that little thing, so it does take practice. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Take simple steps. Give yourself credit for the progress. Okay? So that you get those dopamine hits, so that you are still getting that chemical, okay, but it's more of the healthy dopamine rather than that adrenaline rush, which builds that cortisol, which isn't quite as healthy as the healthy dopamine.
That's great. Thank you. Do we have other questions for Elizabeth before we thank her? Which we do naturally anyway.
Elizabeth, I'm curious about the yawning that you do, because I also was yawning and I felt like release as well.
Yeah, so I don't know why. It's just the technique that I use when I hold space with people, and sometimes the person that I'm with, and it can happen in group or individually, will also yawn. But there was a neurologist who said that, oh yeah, like they explained it. I don't understand what the yawning is about, but basically there's something on a cellular level that's kind of releasing and getting oxygen, and it's all part of that. When releasing the emotions, then there's like this connection with getting oxygen, and then we spontaneously yawn. But not everybody does, so don't worry if you didn't yawn. It doesn't mean you failed it, okay? Don't worry. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be a certain way.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm going to close our meeting for tonight. I just feel richly blessed by all that has been shared tonight, each of you holding space and contributing to us having a song in our hearts. So perhaps as you end your day today, take just a moment to jot down a few words of the song that you heard in your heart today. And bring that back with you tomorrow when we meet again at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And we have a full day tomorrow of amazing presenters who will also help you to hear the song that is in your heart.
Hey, Steve, we forgot to do the best part. We have the wheel of names available.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Well, hang on, everyone, because you guys made it to the end. We had a couple people drop off, and so I really we all appreciate you staying on. We have John in the UK. It's like 1 a.m. for Jewel, and so this is my favorite part where our presenters have given some amazing additional resources, and we're going to spin the wheel. I'm going to share my screen, and all your names are put on here. It's for the attendees only, and we'll spin the wheel and have some amazing offers. So one moment here. All right, so this is the wheel of names. Make sure I got everybody on here that's still here. And the first giveaway, if you remember from Sherry's presentation, if you were here to listen to Sherry talk about self-publishing, she has an amazing offer of a 6-week video course that's going to take you through your courage, your risk, and rewards, all about self-publishing. And so fingers crossed for whoever wins this, because it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to work with Sherry. Oh, and you do have to be present to win, so hang on 1 second. I'm going to do it again because as Drew, I don't think it's still here anymore. So let me do it again. Yay, so Francisca Harding, congratulations. So I will get in touch with you. If you can just hang back in the chat for a bit, and I will get you the link to sign up for Sherry's class. And you've heard from, Elizabeth just now, and she is just a phenomenal coach. I've had some sessions with her. She's coached personally Steve. And so she's offering a 50-minute from clear to create session. So getting that clarity, really, cementing that belief and then going to create, right? So it's a 50-minute session with Elizabeth. So let's see here. Congratulations. Awesome. So I know it's late for you, Jewel, but if you could hang back for just a few minutes so that I can just grab your info, and then we'll make sure you get set up with Elizabeth. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And make sure you save the chat. So go ahead and download the chat, because I did drop some links in there to stay connected with our presenters today. So we have links for Dawn. Listen to the Optimal Wellness audio. We've got the 3 keys to feel good enough from Elizabeth. And then, of course, the YouTube playlist of top 10 interviews with Sherry. So those links are all in the chat. So go ahead and save your chat as well. Excellent. So Jewel and Francisca, just hang back for me, and we will all see you tomorrow. Have a great night.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Steve, hang on 1 second. Let me just grab the information before you close out. Let's see.
We're going to hang out afterwards, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes. Francisca. Jewel. Oh, nice to see you. Thank you for turning your camera on. Okay. Jewel, can you put in the chat your email address for me, please?
Hello, everybody, by the way. So
Hello.
I'm in bed. It's 2 a.m., so I'm actually in bed, and I thought I'd better not show myself in my bedroom. So
Wow, that's
why I was off
dedication.
camera.
You are a trooper. Thank you for staying to the end. And you got a fantastic prize. I mean, to sit with Elizabeth.
I was going to say, it can't be bad, can it? I was quite chuffed with that. Thank you.
She's
So,
You
awesome.
know,
yeah,
so I was like,
appreciate it.
please hang on for a few more minutes because you were about ready to go to, sleep. And I was like, just hang on because we got giveaways. So totally not rigged. I mean, you saw me spin.
I was very appreciative, actually. I thought, okay, fair enough. I can stay awake for a bit longer. It's very hot over here. I don't know what it's like over where you are, but in the UK, it is exceedingly hot. So
Mm.
staying awake tonight is a little bit easier than it normally would be because you're so hot. You can't.
Mm.
But I'm very grateful, and thank you, Steve, for responding earlier, and yourself, Olivia. Obviously, there you go. That's the email address. Is that all that you needed from me?
That's all that I need. And I will make sure I'm going to email